Commander Zelthar had seen many species wage war across the galaxy. The elegant Veilthans with their crystalline weapons that sang death songs. The brutal Caraxians who fought with savage fury until their last breath. The calculating Nexari who turned battlefields into geometric puzzles of destruction. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed when humanity entered the galactic stage. The first reports seemed almost comical. A new species had emerged from a backwater system, claiming they wanted to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. They called themselves humans, and their representative was a small female with dark hair who smiled too much. Ambassador Sarah Chun had sat across from the Coalition Council with that unsettling expression. Her lips curved upward in what their databases indicated was a sign of pleasure or friendliness. "We understand you're facing difficulties with the Devourer fleet," she had said, her voice carrying an odd musical quality. Earth would like to contribute to the defense effort. The Council had barely contained their amusement. This species was barely past primitive spaceflight, using chemical rockets and metal hulls. Their weapons were projectile-based, throwing small pieces of metal at supersonic speeds. Compared to the energy weapons and quantum disruptors of civilized species, it was like bringing a sharp stick to a plasma fight. But the Devourer crisis was real. The massive biomechanical ships had consumed 17 systems in 6 months, leaving behind empty husks of worlds. Every coalition fleet sent against them had been overwhelmed, their crews consumed to fuel the Devourer's endless hunger. Desperation made even the most unlikely allies welcome. Zelthar remembered standing in the command center of the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance when the human vessels first appeared. 12 ships, each one a crude assemblage of metal and ceramic plating. No energy shields, no quantum cores, no particle beam arrays. Just thick armor and what appeared to be projectile weapons scaled up to ship-sized proportions. "Sir," his tactical officer Namora had whispered, her tentacles writhing with barely suppressed mirth. "Their largest vessel is smaller than our escort frigates. Should we assign them to rearguard duty?" The human fleet commander had introduced himself as Admiral Marcus Torres, a grizzled male with streaks of gray in his dark hair and scars across his weathered face. When he spoke, there was something in his eyes that made Zelthar's thermal receptors flicker with unease. The human smile never reached those cold, calculating eyes. "Coalition Command, this is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. We're ready to engage the enemy. Just point us in the right direction." The battle began 3 days later when Devourer scouts probed the Zirian system. The Coalition fleet moved into defensive positions around the inhabited worlds, their sleek vessels forming elegant geometric patterns that maximized their energy weapon coverage. The human ships moved differently, clustering together in what appeared to be a chaotic formation. When the first Devourer ship emerged from its spatial fold, Zelthar watched in fascination as the human vessels immediately began moving. Not toward defensive positions, but directly at the enemy craft. The Devourer vessel was massive, its biomechanical hull pulsing with veins of energy, weapon pods extending like malignant growths along its surface. The Coalition fleet opened fire with their standard tactics, synchronized energy bursts designed to overwhelm shields and disable key systems. The beams struck the Devourer's hull, causing minor damage, but nothing that would stop its advance. Then, the humans fired. The sound that reached them through the communications channels was unlike anything Zelthar had ever heard. Not the clean hum of energy weapons or the subtle whisper of particle beams, but a deep, thunderous roar that seemed to shake space itself. The human ships had launched thousands of projectiles, each one leaving trails of exhaust and flame. But these weren't simple kinetic rounds. As they struck the Devourer vessel, they detonated with nuclear fire. Dozens of fusion warheads transformed the creature's hull into a blazing inferno. The biomechanical ship writhed in apparent agony, its weapon pods firing wildly as sections of its body were vaporized in atomic flame. "Remarkable," breathed Science Officer Kelleth from his sensor station. "They're using primitive atomic weapons, but in such massive quantities that the cumulative effect is devastating." The human ships pressed their attack, launching wave after wave of nuclear missiles while their projectile weapons hammered the creature's remaining hull. But it was what happened next that made Zelthar's blood run cold. As the Devourer's ship began to die, escape pods began launching from its hull. These were the crew, desperate to flee their dying vessel. In every battle Zelthar had witnessed, there was an unspoken agreement among civilized species. Combat crews and escape pods were generally left alone, recovered later for prisoner exchanges, or simply allowed to drift until rescue arrived. The humans obliterated every single pod with precise bursts of projectile fire. Admiral Torres, Zelthar transmitted urgently, "Those are escape pods. The crew is attempting to surrender." The human's response came back immediately, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. "Commander Zelthar, with respect, the Devourers don't take prisoners. They consume everything they capture to fuel their war machine. Every pod that escapes becomes intelligence for their next attack, and every survivor becomes food for their next vessel." The tactical logic was flawless and utterly horrifying. As the battle continued and more Devourer ships arrived, Zelthar watched the humans fight with a methodical efficiency that chilled his soul. They used their smaller size and maneuverability to dart between the massive enemy vessels, targeting not weapons or engines, but what their databases identified as crew quarters and life support systems. They weren't trying to disable the ships for capture or salvage. They were systematically exterminating everything aboard them. When a damaged human vessel found itself surrounded by 3 Devourer escort craft, Zelthar expected them to surrender or attempt to escape. Instead, the ship accelerated directly toward the largest enemy vessel, its engines blazing at maximum power. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Indefatigable," came the transmission. "It's been an honor serving with you all. Give him hell." The human ship struck the Devourer vessel at 30% of light speed, its hull loaded with nuclear charges. The explosion vaporized both ships and severely damaged the other 2 Devourers, leaving them vulnerable to follow-up attacks from the surviving human vessels. By the end of the engagement, the human fleet had lost 4 ships and nearly 2,000 crew members. But they had completely annihilated a Devourer battle group that had been terrorizing Coalition space for months. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. Not a single survivor remained. As the human ships regrouped for damage assessment, Zelthar found himself studying the sensor readings of the battle. The efficiency was staggering. The humans had identified the most effective tactics against the Devourers within minutes of first contact and adapted their entire fleet strategy accordingly. They showed no hesitation in sacrificing their own vessels when it would ensure enemy destruction. "Commander," Namora whispered, her tentacles now trembling with something that wasn't amusement, "I've been analyzing their communication patterns during the battle." They were excited. Their stress hormones spiked, not from fear, but from what their databases classify as anticipation and pleasure. Zelthar stared at the display, showing the debris field where the battle had taken place. Twisted metal and organic matter drifted in the void, all that remained of ships that had once housed thousands of living beings. The humans had enjoyed it. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "Admiral Torres is requesting permission to pursue any surviving Devourer craft that might have escaped the system." Zelthar looked at the tactical display. There were no surviving craft. The humans had made absolutely certain of that. But Torres was asking permission to hunt for enemies that might exist somewhere in the vast darkness between stars. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zelthar understood what it meant to be truly afraid. Not of dying in battle, not of defeat or capture, but of the allies fighting beside him. These humans didn't just wage war. They waged extinction, with smiles on their faces and joy in their hearts. And they had just asked to hunt for more. 3 weeks after the Zirian engagement, Commander Zelthar received orders that made his thermal regulation systems spike with anxiety. The Coalition High Command was assigning human forces to his personal battle group for the defense of the Carillion mining colonies. Intelligence suggested the Devourers were massing for a major assault, and every available ship was needed. The human contingent arrived ahead of schedule. Naturally, Zelthar had learned that humans seemed incapable of arriving anywhere at the appointed time, always early or late, never precisely when expected. Admiral Torres greeted him via communication link with that same unsettling smile, though something in his expression had changed since their last encounter. "Commander Zelthar, good to see you again. I trust your crew has had time to review our tactical reports from Zirian. Indeed, Admiral, your efficiency was quite remarkable. Zelthar chose his words carefully, still processing what he had witnessed. I confess, we found your methods somewhat unexpected. Torres's laugh carried an odd quality that made Zelthar's audio processors recalibrate automatically. Unexpected is one word for it. My crew prefers thorough. We've had some time to think about Devourer tactics since our last encounter. I think you'll find our new strategies even more interesting. Before Zelthar could ask what that meant, his sensor officer interrupted with urgent readings. Commander, multiple spatial distortions detected at the system's edge. Devourer fleet emerging from fold space. The tactical display lit up with hostile contacts. 12 massive bio-ships, each one larger than anything they had faced before. Support craft swarmed around them like insects, hundreds of smaller vessels that pulsed with the same organic technology. All coalition vessels formed defensive perimeter around the colonies, Zelthar commanded, falling back on standard doctrine. Prepare for sustained engagement. Negative on that, Commander, Torres interjected smoothly. Human fleet is moving to intercept. We'll handle the welcoming committee. Zelthar watched in mounting horror as the human ships accelerated past his fleet at maximum burn, heading directly toward the overwhelming enemy force. Admiral, you're outnumbered 12-1 in capital ships alone. Fall back to defensive positions. Outnumbered, yes. Outgunned. Torres paused, and when he spoke again, there was something predatory in his voice. We'll see about that. The human ships have been modified since Zirian. Additional weapon pods covered their hulls like metallic tumors, and strange new arrays extended from their superstructures. As they approached the Devourer fleet, these arrays began to emit radiation signatures that made Zelthar's instruments scream warnings. Were those energy readings? Science Officer Kelleth demanded, his voice tight with confusion. I'm detecting massive quantum fluctuations from the human vessels. The answer came when the humans opened fire. But instead of the nuclear missiles Zelthar expected, the arrays launched something far worse. Streams of antimatter contained in magnetic bottles, each one carrying enough destructive potential to crack a planet's crust. The warhead struck the lead Devourer vessel and simply erased sections of it from existence, leaving perfectly spherical voids where organic hull had been. Antimatter weapons? Zelthar whispered. How did they develop antimatter weapons in 3 weeks? His communications officer looked up from her console, her face pale with shock. Sir, I'm receiving a message from Admiral Torres. He says, and I quote, we didn't develop them. We've had them for decades. We just never had a good reason to use them before. The implications hit Zelthar like a plasma burst to the chest. Humanity had possessed planet-killing weapons for decades, and simply chose not to use them in their first engagement. They had fought the Devourers at Zirian with what they considered their conventional arsenal. The battle quickly became a massacre, but not in the way anyone expected. The human ships moved through the Devourer fleet like apex predators among prey, their antimatter weapons carving perfect holes through organic hulls while their projectile arrays swept enemy fighters from space. But it was their coordination that truly terrified Zelthar. The human vessels fought as a single entity, communicating through encrypted channels at light speed, sharing targeting data and tactical information in real time. When one ship took damage, the others moved to cover it without being asked. When an enemy vessel tried to escape, multiple human ships converged on it from different vectors, their attacks timed to prevent any possible evasion. Commander, Tactical Officer Namora reported, her voice barely controlled. The humans are using psychological warfare. They're broadcasting on open channels. Broadcasting what? Music, sir. Human combat music. And they're transmitting it on frequencies the Devourers use for ship-to-ship communication. Zelthar activated the audio feed and immediately wished he hadn't. The sound that filled the bridge was unlike anything in his experience. Rhythmic, driving, with a bass line that seemed to sync with his heartbeat, and vocals that spoke of violence and victory. But underneath it all was something else, something that made his primitive brain scream warnings about predators in the dark. The humans were enjoying themselves. As the battle raged, Zelthar noticed something else disturbing about human tactics. They weren't just destroying Devourer ships, they were studying them. Human vessels would disable enemy craft with precise shots, then launch boarding pods. Within minutes, the pods would return, and the disabled ship would be vaporized. Admiral Torres, what are your boarding teams extracting from enemy vessels? The human's response came back immediately. Intelligence, Commander. Communication protocols, navigation data, biological samples. Everything we need to understand how they think and where they come from. And the crews? There was a pause that lasted exactly 3 seconds. What crews? The casual way Torres said it made Zelthar's thermal regulators shut down entirely. The humans weren't taking prisoners. They were taking ships, extracting everything useful, and eliminating all witnesses in minutes. Halfway through the engagement, something unprecedented happened. A Devourer vessel tried to surrender. Its weapon pods retracted, its engines powered down, and it began broadcasting what Coalition databases identified as universal surrender protocols. Zelthar watched the human response with growing dread. Instead of accepting the surrender, human boarding craft immediately launched toward the vessel. The ship was breached in 6 locations simultaneously, and within 10 minutes, the human teams had withdrawn. The Devourer vessel exploded moments later. Admiral, that ship was surrendering. There are laws governing. Commander, Torres interrupted, his voice carrying a new edge. That ship contained 14,000 Devourer crew members. Our intelligence indicates they require approximately 50 sentient beings per day for sustenance. That means in the time it would take us to process their surrender and establish a prisoner facility, they would need to consume 700,000 people to stay alive. The mathematics were flawless and absolutely terrifying. Besides, Torres continued, his tone becoming almost conversational, we found something interesting in their databanks. This fleet isn't just raiding for food. They're scouting for something called the Gray Harvest. Apparently, this entire sector is scheduled for systematic consumption. The tactical display updated with new information as the human ships shared their acquired intelligence. Star charts showing Devourer movement patterns, resource calculations for planetary consumption, and, most horrifying of all, detailed biological analyses of every species in the Coalition. They've been cataloging us, Science Officer Kelleth whispered. Nutritional content, population densities, optimal harvesting techniques. We're livestock to them. The last Devourer ship tried to escape, activating its full drive to flee the system. The human response was immediate and decisive. 3 ships launched nuclear-tipped missiles programmed to detonate during the full transition. The explosions tore a hole in space-time itself, trapping the escaping vessel between dimensions where it was slowly crushed by cosmic forces. As the battle concluded and the debris field settled into orbit around the system star, Zelthar found himself staring at the tactical summary. Total enemy casualties, approximately 60,000 Devourer personnel. Total coalition casualty, 0. Total human casualties, 47 crew members from 1 ship that took a direct hit from a dying Devourer's final weapon discharge. Commander, Torres's voice came through the communication system. We're uploading all acquired intelligence to your databases. I think you'll find it illuminating. The Devourer home systems are located approximately 40 light-years from here. Our analysis suggests they have a fleet composition of several hundred capital ships. Zelthar's audio receptors focused sharply. Several hundred? Admiral, that's 10 times larger than our combined fleets. Yes, sir. Quite a challenge. There was that smile again, audible even through the communication link. We'll need to be creative. For the second time in as many months, Commander Zelthar realized he was more afraid of his allies than his enemies. The human spoke of facing impossible odds with the same tone others used to discuss the weather. They had just learned that their enemy possessed overwhelming numerical superiority, and their response was to start planning how to kill them all. As the human ships prepared to return to Earth for resupply and reinforcement, Admiral Torres sent one final transmission. Commander, it's been a pleasure working with your fleet. We'll be back in 6 weeks with additional ships and some new equipment we've been developing. I think the Devourers are going to be very surprised by what humanity can accomplish when we put our minds to it. The communication ended, leaving Zelthar alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Humanity hadn't just joined the war against the Devourers. They were going to end it. 6 weeks later, Commander Zelthar stood in the observation deck of Coalition Command, watching humanity arrive for what they called Operation Starfall. What he saw defied every assumption he had made about their species' capabilities. The human fleet that emerged from Fold Space was 5 times larger than their previous force. Massive dreadnoughts, bristling with weapon arrays, led formations of cruisers and destroyers, while strange new vessel types moved among them like mechanical predators. But it was the ships themselves that made Zelthar's thermal regulators spike with alarm. These weren't the crude metal hulls he had seen before. The new human vessels were sleek, angular constructs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Energy readings indicated advanced shielding systems, quantum cores, and weapon technologies that matched or exceeded Coalition standards. In 6 weeks, humanity had somehow leapfrogged centuries of technological development. "Commander," Science Officer Kelleth reported from a station, "I'm detecting energy signatures I don't recognize. These ships are using technologies that aren't in our databases." Admiral Torres materialized on the main display with his characteristic smile, but something fundamental had changed about the human leader. His eyes held a cold intensity that made Zelthar uncomfortable, and there were new scars across his face that hadn't been there before. "Commander Zelthar, Coalition Command. Earth sends its regards, and our contribution to ending the Devourer threat." Torres gestured behind him, where dozens of humans worked at advanced control stations. "I trust you've reviewed our operational plans?" Zelthar had indeed reviewed them, and they had given him nightmares. Operation Starfall wasn't a defensive strategy or even a conventional assault. It was genocide planned with scientific precision. "Admiral, your proposal to target Devourer home systems directly is ambitious, but intelligence suggests they have defensive installations that could destroy entire fleets." "Correct, which is why we're not sending fleets." Torres's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than Zelthar remembered. "We're sending something else entirely." Before Zelthar could ask what that meant, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Emerging from behind the human dreadnoughts came vessels unlike anything he had ever seen. They were massive constructs of metal and energy, roughly cylindrical in shape, with no obvious weapon ports or engine emissions. They simply hung in space like technological monoliths. "What are those?" demanded Coalition Admiral Vorthak, his crystalline features flashing with alarm colors. "Relativistic kill vehicles," Torres replied casually. "Each one masses approximately 50 million tons and is capable of accelerating to 97% of light speed. We call them planet crackers." The casual way he said it made Zelthar's audio processors glitch. Planet crackers? When a 50 million ton object strikes a planetary surface at near light speed, the kinetic energy release is equivalent to approximately 3 billion fusion warheads detonating simultaneously. The target world becomes uninhabitable for several thousand years. Coalition Command fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. The humans had built weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds, and they spoke about it the way others discussed weather patterns. "Admiral," Zelthar managed, "surely you don't intend to destroy inhabited planets?" Torres's expression didn't change. "Commander, our intelligence from the last engagement indicates the Devourers have consumed the populations of 43 worlds in this sector alone. That's approximately 800 billion sentient beings used as food over the past century. Their industrial facilities are powered by the suffering of enslaved populations from conquered species." The tactical display updated with horrifying detail. Images captured by human intelligence showed Devourer harvesting operations, where entire civilizations were processed like agricultural products. Breeding facilities where captured beings were forced to reproduce to maintain food supplies. Industrial complexes where the screams of tortured prisoners powered exotic energy systems. "The Devourer home systems contain no innocent civilians," Torres continued, his voice maintaining that same terrifying calm. "They are military-industrial complexes devoted entirely to the consumption of sentient life. Every structure, every facility, every individual exists solely to support their expansion and feeding." Science Officer Kelleth studied the intelligence data with growing horror. "Commander, according to this analysis, The Devourers don't just consume other species. They've genetically modified themselves over millennia to require the consumption of sentient beings. They literally cannot survive without causing suffering. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a war between competing civilizations. This was a conflict between predators and prey on a galactic scale, and the predators had made themselves incapable of peaceful coexistence. Our xenobiologists have confirmed the analysis, Torres added. The devourer species has engineered itself into an evolutionary dead end. They must consume other intelligent life or die. There can be no negotiation, no peace treaty, no coexistence. They will continue consuming until they have devoured every sentient being in the galaxy, and then they will die of starvation. Admiral Vorthack's crystalline form shifted through several color patterns, indicating deep distress. Even so, the complete destruction of entire worlds seems excessive. Surely there must be alternatives. Torres activated a holographic display showing recent devourer communications that human intelligence had intercepted. The translations were provided by coalition linguistic computers, and the content made Zelthar's thermal sensors shut down entirely. The communications were discussions of taste preferences. Devourer commanders debating which species provided the most satisfying consumption experiences. Technical analyses of fear responses and how to maximize suffering during the harvesting process. Detailed plans for the systematic consumption of the remaining free worlds, with populations ranked by nutritional value and entertainment potential. They're not just killing for food, Kelleth whispered. They enjoy it. The suffering is part of the consumption process. Correct, Torres confirmed. Devourer neurology requires the neurochemical compounds produced by extreme fear and pain. They have literally evolved to require torture as part of their feeding. Every moment they exist, they are planning new ways to cause suffering on a galactic scale. The bridge fell silent as the full scope of the Devourer threat became clear. This wasn't a conventional enemy that could be defeated and negotiated with. This was a species that had transformed itself into a cosmic cancer, capable only of consumption and destruction. Our planet crackers will target the 17 Devourer home systems simultaneously, Torres explained, his tactical display showing precision strike coordinates. Each world will be hit by multiple vehicles to ensure complete sterilization. The strikes are timed to prevent any possibility of evacuation or escape. What about the Devourer fleets currently operating in coalition space? Zelthar asked. Torres's smile became something that belonged in nightmares. That's where the real creativity comes in. We've developed some new weapons specifically designed for ship-to-ship combat. Would you like a demonstration? Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout Coalition Command. Emergency sensors detected a massive spatial distortion approaching the system, and tactical displays lit up with incoming contacts. A Devourer battle group had arrived, apparently drawn by the concentration of Coalition and human forces. Perfect timing, Torres murmured. All human vessels, implement Hellfire Protocol. Let's show our allies what we've learned. The human fleet moved with inhuman precision, spreading into formations that defied conventional tactical doctrine. Instead of organizing into battle lines or defensive screens, they formed complex, three-dimensional patterns that seemed to have no military purpose. The lead Devourer ship opened fire with its bioplasma weapons, sending streams of corrosive energy toward the nearest human vessel. The attack struck the ship's shields and simply vanished, absorbed completely without any visible effect. Energy absorption fields, Torres explained conversationally. We studied Devourer plasma signatures and designed our shields to convert their weapons into power for our own systems. The more they shoot at us, the stronger we become. The human counterattack was unlike anything Zelthar had witnessed. Instead of conventional weapons, the human ships launched what appeared to be metallic spheres that moved with impossible speed and agility. These spheres swarmed over the Devourer vessels like mechanical insects, boring through their bioarmor with molecular disassembler beams. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was what the spheres did after they penetrated the enemy hulls. Nanite swarms, Torres explained as screens showed the interior of Devourer ships being systematically dismantled from within. self-replicating construction units programmed to disassemble organic matter and convert it into additional nanites. Each sphere contains approximately 1 billion individual units. Zelthar watched in horror as Devourer crew members were literally dissolved at the molecular level, their constituent atoms being rearranged into more nanite swarms. Within minutes, entire sections of enemy ships were being converted into clouds of mechanical predators that spread through the vessels like technological plagues. The nanites are also programmed to extract information, Torres continued. Memory engrams, genetic data, technological specifications. By the time they finish processing a ship, we know everything its crew knew. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it ended, 12 Devourer vessels and their crews had been completely converted into raw materials and data. The human nanite swarms returned to their launch vessels, carrying terabytes of intelligence and enough process matter to construct several new ships. Total enemy casualties: 47,000 Devourers, Torres reported with satisfaction. Total intelligence gathered: complete navigational databases, fleet dispositions, and biological specifications for 17 different consumed species. Human casualties: 0. As the tactical displays updated with the vast amount of intelligence the nanites had extracted, Zelthar realized that humanity's understanding of Devourer capabilities now exceeded even Coalition estimates. They knew where every enemy ship was located, how every weapon system functioned, and the exact specifications of every defensive installation. Operation Starfall commences in 72 hours, Torres announced to Coalition Command. I recommend all friendly forces maintain minimum safe distance from Devourer home systems. The electromagnetic pulses from our planet crackers tend to interfere with ship systems for several light years. Admiral Vorthack's crystalline form flickered with patterns indicating extreme distress. Admiral Torres, what you're proposing is the complete extermination of an entire species. Torres turned toward the Coalition commander, and for a moment his mask of humanity slipped entirely. What looked back at them was something cold and calculating, a mind that had looked into the abyss and decided to become something worse than what it found there. Admiral Vorthack, with all due respect, the Devourers made that choice when they decided to eat sentient beings for pleasure. We're simply ensuring they don't get the chance to make it again. The communication ended, leaving Coalition Command in stunned silence. Humanity had revealed technologies that bordered on the magical, tactics that redefined the nature of warfare itself, and a willingness to commit genocide that made even hardened military commanders uncomfortable. But as Zelthar studied the intelligence data showing the scope of Devourer atrocities, he found himself unable to argue with human logic. This wasn't a war between equals. This was pest control on a galactic scale, and the exterminators had arrived. 72 hours after Admiral Torres's announcement, Commander Zelthar found himself aboard the human command vessel Inevitable Conclusion, witnessing the final preparations for Operation Starfall. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The human crew worked with mechanical efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated like components in a vast machine. But it was their emotional state that disturbed him most. These weren't soldiers grimly preparing for a necessary but distasteful duty. They were predators anticipating a hunt, their stress hormones spiking with what Coalition databases classified as excitement and anticipation. Commander Zelthar, Admiral Torres greeted him in the observation deck overlooking the ship's tactical center. Thank you for accepting our invitation to observe. Your Coalition's historical records will want to document what happens here today. Below them, hundreds of humans monitored displays showing real-time intelligence from across Devourer space. Nanite infiltrators have been spreading through enemy systems for weeks, providing detailed surveillance of every installation, every ship, every population center. The scope of information was staggering. Admiral, Zelthar said carefully, I must ask one final time. Are you certain there's no alternative to complete extermination? Torres gestured to a holographic display showing intercepted Devourer communications from the past 24 hours. The translations made Zelthar's thermal regulators shut down with horror. The enemy had detected signs of human activity and were accelerating their consumption protocols. Entire enslaved populations were being harvested immediately rather than maintained for long-term feeding, to prevent their rescue by coalition forces. In the past day alone, they've consumed 40 million sentients rather than allow them to be liberated, Torres said, his voice carrying that terrifying calm. They would rather eat their slaves than lose them. That tells you everything you need to know about their psychology. Science Officer Kelleth, who had also been invited to observe, studied readings from the tactical center with growing unease. Commander, the energy signatures I'm detecting from their weapon systems are unlike anything in our databases. How did they develop such advanced technology? They didn't develop it, a new voice answered. Dr. Sarah Chun, the same ambassador who had first approached the coalition, stepped onto the observation deck. But like Torres, she had changed dramatically. Her pleasant smile remained, but her eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed ancient and terrible. Dr. Chun, Zelthar acknowledged. I wasn't aware you had military rank. I don't, but I do have a background in xenobiology and adaptive psychology. She activated a holographic display showing Devourer evolutionary history. We've been studying them intensively since first contact. What we discovered explains everything about their capabilities and their limitations. The display showed the Devourer species' development over millions of years. They hadn't evolved naturally into their current form. Sometime in their distant past, they had encountered another species with advanced genetic manipulation technology. Instead of forming an alliance or trading relationship, the Devourers had consumed their benefactors and stolen their technology. They've done this before, Dr. Chen explained. 17 times, to be exact. They encounter a technologically advanced species, infiltrate their society, learn their capabilities, and then consume them completely while integrating their technology. They're technological parasites on a cosmic scale. That's how they developed faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and biomanipulation capabilities, Torres added. They didn't invent any of it. They ate the species that did. The implications were staggering. The Devourers weren't just a threat to current galactic civilization. They were a recurring catastrophe, a species that had been consuming and destroying advanced cultures for millions of years. Our analysis indicates they've consumed at least 47 different spacefaring species, Dr. Chun continued. Entire civilizations that developed art, philosophy, science, and culture, all reduced to nutrients for Devourer expansion. Every breakthrough they achieved, every beautiful thing they created, every individual life that held meaning and purpose, all gone. Kelleth's audio receptors focused sharply. 47 species? That's more advanced civilizations than currently exist in the entire known galaxy. Correct. And that number only includes the ones we can identify from genetic residue in Devourer biosystems. There are probably many more. Dr. Chen's smile never wavered, but her eyes reflected depths of rage that made Zelthar step backward unconsciously. Think about what the galaxy might have been if those species still existed. What wonders they might have created, what problems they might have solved, what beauty they might have added to the universe. The weight of that loss was crushing. Millions of years of potential progress, countless lives that had held dreams and hopes and love, all consumed to fuel the endless hunger of a species that had chosen to become cosmic predators. Operation Starfall isn't revenge, Torres said quietly. It's conservation. We're preventing them from doing to others what they've done to 47 previous civilizations. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as targeting systems achieved final lock on their distant targets. 17 Devourer home systems, each containing multiple worlds with billions of inhabitants, all focused on the single purpose of consuming other species. All planet cracker vehicles report ready status, came the announcement from the tactical center. Firing solutions confirmed. Time to target impact. 6 hours, 37 minutes. Commence Operation Starfall, Torres ordered. The weapons launched without fanfare or ceremony. No dramatic energy beams or explosive sounds marked their departure. The planet crackers simply vanished from the ship's launch bays, accelerated to near-light speed by technologies that bent space-time itself. They're undetectable once launched, Torres explained to the observation team. No energy signature, no mass readings that would register on conventional sensors. The Devourers won't know they're coming until impact. As the weapons traveled toward their targets, Dr. Chen activated displays showing real-time surveillance of Devourer activities. Even knowing they faced an unprecedented threat, the enemy continued their harvesting operations. Processing facilities worked at maximum capacity, extracting every possible calorie from captured populations before the expected human assault. "Look at them," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying infinite sadness and rage. Even facing their own extinction, they can't stop consuming. They're literally incapable of any behavior that doesn't involve causing suffering. "Dr. Chen," Zelthar asked carefully, "how did humanity develop such advanced weapons so quickly? Your species was barely capable of interstellar flight months ago." The human ambassador turned toward him with that unsettling smile. "Commander, did you ever wonder why a species like ours managed to become the dominant predator on a world filled with larger, stronger, faster animals?" Zelthar hadn't considered the question, but it was a valid point. Humans were physically unremarkable compared to many species, yet they had somehow conquered their entire planet. "We're pack hunters," Dr. Chen explained. "But more than that, we're adaptive pack hunters. When we encounter a superior predator, we don't just fight it. We study it, learn from it, and then become something that could defeat it. Humanity has been doing this for millions of years." She gestured to displays showing human technological development since first contact with the Devourers. Fusion weapons, antimatter containment, nanite swarms, relativistic kill vehicles, energy absorption fields. Each advancement built on analysis of enemy capabilities. "We didn't develop these technologies from scratch," Torres admitted. "We adapted them from Devourer systems we captured. Their own weapons turned against them with human improvements. They taught us how to kill them efficiently." "But the scale of advancement seems impossible," Keleth protested. "You've made centuries of progress in months." Dr. Chen's smile became something that belonged in nightmares. "Commander Keleth, your species develops technology gradually, refining existing systems over generations. Humanity develops technology like we hunt. When we encounter a threat, we become whatever we need to become to eliminate it." The tactical display updated as the first planet crackers reached their targets. The impacts were visible as brief flashes of light across 17 different star systems, each one marking the death of an entire world. The energy releases were so massive that they temporarily outshone their host stars, creating artificial supernovas that would be visible from thousands of light years away. Korthak Prime, direct hit. Planet cracked, surface temperature now 4,000 degrees, reported the Tactical Center. Valerian system, multiple impacts confirmed. All 3 inhabited worlds sterilized. Nexus Hive, complete atmospheric loss detected. One by one, the Devourer home worlds died. Billions of years of geological history erased in microseconds. Complex ecosystems reduced to molten slag, entire civilizations vaporized in nuclear fire. But these weren't innocent worlds being destroyed. These were industrial complexes devoted entirely to the consumption of other species. Intelligence estimates indicate we've eliminated approximately 40 billion Devourer personnel, Torres reported as the tactical summary updated. Industrial capacity reduced by 97%. Remaining fleet assets isolated in deep space without support infrastructure. Zelthar studied the displays showing the aftermath of the strikes. 17 star systems now contain nothing but debris fields and radiation. The most prolific predator species in galactic history had been reduced to scattered survivors with no home to return to. The remaining fleets will be hunted down over the coming months, Dr. Chen explained. Our nanite infiltrators have already identified their locations and capabilities. They have nowhere to run and no way to replace their losses. What about their enslaved populations? Keleth asked. Surely some could have been saved. Torres and Dr. Chen exchanged a look that made Zelthar's thermal sensors spike with alarm. We scanned for life signs that weren't Devourer, Torres said carefully. Any enslaved populations were processed before our weapons arrived. The Devourers made sure of that. The implications hit like a plasma burst. The enemy had murdered their slaves rather than allow them to be liberated. Millions of sentient beings had been consumed in the final hours before the planet crackers arrived, their deaths timed to deny humanity the satisfaction of rescue. They ate them all, Dr. Chun said simply. Every slave, every prisoner, every captured individual. Rather than face extinction knowing their victims might be freed, they chose to consume everything they could reach. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of ship systems and the distant sound of human crew members celebrating their victory. 47 species that had taken millions of years to evolve, billions of individuals who had possessed hopes and dreams and families, all reduced to nutrients in the final desperate hours of a dying predator civilization. Now you understand, Torres said quietly, why we couldn't allow any of them to survive. They would rather commit genocide than face defeat. That's not an enemy you negotiate with. That's an enemy you exterminate before it can hurt anyone else. As the tactical displays showed the final planet cracker impacts and the complete destruction of the last Devourer world, Zelthar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just the end of a war, but the complete extinction of a species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. Humanity hadn't just won a victory. They had ended a cosmic catastrophe that had been consuming civilizations since before his own species had discovered fire. And they had done it with the same casual efficiency they brought to everything else, as if the complete extinction of a galactic predator species was just another problem to be solved. 6 months after Operation Starfall, Commander Zelthar stood before the Galactic Coalition Council to deliver his final report on humanity's integration into galactic civilization. What he had to say would fundamentally change how every species in the galaxy viewed their new allies. Honored council members, Zelthar began, his thermal regulators carefully controlled despite the anxiety coursing through his systems. I have completed my comprehensive analysis of human military capabilities, psychological profiles, and long-term strategic intentions. What I discovered challenges our understanding of what it means to be a civilized species. The council chamber held representatives from 43 different worlds, each one eager to understand the species that had single-handedly ended the Devourer threat. But Zelthar's expression made several of them shift uncomfortably in their atmospheric suits and gravitational fields. The humans have successfully eliminated the remaining Devourer fleets, he continued. All 17 scattered battle groups have been located and destroyed using the nanite swarm technology you witnessed during Operation Starfall. Conservative estimates suggest they exterminated approximately 60 million additional Devourer personnel in these cleaning operations. Admiral Vorthack's crystalline form shifted through colors indicating approval. Excellent news, Commander. The galaxy is finally safe from their threat. Safe from the Devourers, yes, Zelthar agreed. But I must address what we've learned about humanity in the process of achieving that safety. He activated the holographic display system and began presenting data that made the council chambers fall silent. Charts showing human technological advancement, psychological profiles of their military leadership, and, most disturbing of all, intercepted communications between Earth and their fleet commanders. During the 6 months of cleanup operations, humanity has demonstrated technological development at a rate that defies our understanding of scientific progress. They've reverse-engineered and improved upon every piece of Devourer technology they captured, often within weeks of acquisition. Science Coordinator Nemtha, representing the research-focused Kalari Collective, studied the data with growing alarm. Commander, these advancement rates are impossible. Even with captured technology, the time required to understand and integrate new scientific principles should require years, not days. That's what I thought as well, Zelthar replied. Until I discovered how humans actually approach technological development. They don't research technology the way we do. They weaponize it. The display updated with examples of human scientific methodology. Where other species would spend years studying the theoretical implications of new discoveries, humans immediately looked for ways to use them as weapons. Exotic matter research became antimatter containment systems. Quantum mechanics studies led to dimensional fold weapons. Even their medical advances were routinely adapted for biological warfare applications. They don't separate scientific research from military application, Zelthar explained. Every human scientist is effectively a weapons researcher. Every breakthrough is immediately evaluated for its potential to eliminate threats. Council member the Irix, whose species had achieved spaceflight through centuries of peaceful scientific advancement, radiated distress pheromones. Surely this is an aberration caused by the war with the Devourers. Once peace is established, they'll return to more civilized research practices. Zelthar's thermal readings spiked as he prepared to deliver the most disturbing part of his report. I thought so as well, until I reviewed their historical records. Humans have been conducting warfare continuously for their entire recorded history. They've never experienced true peace. The display showed human historical data translated and analyzed by coalition xenohistorians. 10,000 years of continuous conflict, from primitive tribal warfare to global conflicts involving weapons of mass destruction. Even during periods when major wars weren't occurring, humans continued developing military technology and training for future conflicts. They're not a peaceful species that learned to fight, Zelthar said quietly. They're a warrior species that learned to build starships. Vorthak's crystalline form flickered through patterns indicating disbelief. Commander, surely you're exaggerating. No species could develop advanced civilization while remaining constantly at war. That's exactly what makes them so dangerous, Zelthar replied. They developed advanced civilization because they were constantly at war. Competition between human nations drove technological advancement. Fear of their enemies motivated scientific breakthroughs. Their entire technological development is the result of trying to kill each other more efficiently. He showed them examples of human technological history. Nuclear power developed from nuclear weapons research. Computer technology advanced through military applications. Space flight achieved through ballistic missile programs. Medical advances driven by the need to treat battlefield injuries. Their peaceful technologies are byproducts of weapons research, Zelthar continued. They didn't develop spaceflight to explore the cosmos. They developed it to deliver warheads to their enemies more accurately. The council chamber erupted in concerned chatter as representatives processed this information. A species that had achieved interstellar capability through weapons research was unprecedented in galactic history. What are their intentions toward the coalition? Asked Defense Coordinator Malvan, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. Do they pose a threat to peaceful species? Zelthar paused, considering his words carefully. They've made no hostile moves toward coalition members. In fact, they've been remarkably helpful in sharing technology and providing security assistance. But their psychological profiles suggest they view the galaxy very differently than we do. He activated communications intercepts that human intelligence had provided, translated, and analyzed by coalition linguists. The conversations between human military commanders revealed thinking patterns that were completely alien to civilized species. They categorize every species they encounter as either threat or asset, Zelthar explained. There's no neutral category in their thinking. Either you're useful to them, or you're a potential enemy to be monitored. And how do they categorize coalition species? Vorthak asked. Currently, as assets. We provide them with resources, intelligence, and cooperation in exchange for security services. But their strategic planning documents suggest this classification could change if circumstances alter. The display showed human contingency plans that have been developed during the Devour War. Detailed analyses of coalition military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and potential threat scenarios. Even while fighting as allies, humans have been preparing for the possibility of future conflicts with their partners. They think like predators, Science Coordinator Nemtha observed, always evaluating their environment for threats and opportunities. Exactly, Zelthar agreed. And that's what makes them so effective against species like the Devourers. They understand predator psychology because they are predators. Council member Thyrix shifted uncomfortably in her environmental suit. Commander, are you suggesting we should fear our human allies? Zelthar considered the question carefully before answering. I'm suggesting we should understand them. Humans aren't evil or malicious. They're protective. They genuinely care about preventing other species from experiencing the kind of suffering the Devourers inflicted. But their methods of protection involve the complete elimination of threats. He showed them the final statistics from the Devourer extinction campaign. Not a single individual from that species remained alive anywhere in the galaxy. Humanity had tracked down every ship, every outpost, every possible survivor, and eliminated them with mechanical efficiency. They don't just defeat their enemies, Zelthar continued. They erased them from existence. The devourer species, which had survived and thrived for millions of years, was completely extinct within 8 months of humanity's first contact with them. The implications hung heavy in the council chamber. A species capable of such thorough destruction was both the greatest protector and the greatest potential threat the galaxy had ever seen. What do you recommend? Vorthak asked. Zelthar looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of peaceful species, each one struggling to understand the implications of humanity's true nature. I recommend we remain valuable assets, he said simply. Humans are loyal to those they consider friends and absolutely lethal to those they consider enemies. As long as we maintain our alliance and continue providing mutual benefit, we're probably the safest species in galactic history. And if that relationship changes? Malden asked quietly. Zelthar's thermal regulators cycled through their full range as he considered his response. Then, we'll discover that the Devourers weren't the most efficient predators in the galaxy. They were just the most obvious ones. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's nature became clear. They had welcomed into their alliance a species that could end any civilization that crossed them, but which had chosen to use that power to protect rather than consume. The humans call it peace through superior firepower, Zelthar concluded. They maintain galactic stability by being so overwhelmingly powerful that no one would dare disturb it. They've essentially appointed themselves as the galaxy's immune system, ready to eliminate any threat that emerges. As the council members began discussing the implications of this revelation, Zelthar reflected on his months of observation. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species joining galactic civilization. They were apex predators who had chosen to protect prey species rather than hunt them. The galaxy was safer than it had ever been, protected by guardians who could eliminate any threat with terrifying efficiency. But that safety came with the understanding that their protectors were the most dangerous predators the universe had ever produced. Fighting alongside humans had taught Commander Zelthar what real terror was. Not the fear of being hunted by predators like the Devourers, but the fear of disappointing the apex predators who had chosen to be friends instead of hunters. And somewhere in the depths of space, human ships continued their patrols, watching for new threats to eliminate and new species to protect, their crews still smiling those unsettling smiles as they scanned the cosmos for anything that might disturb their carefully maintained peace. The galaxy had found its guardians. The question was whether it would ever be brave enough to ask them to leave.